Welcome to What Dogs Have Taught Me. I'm your host, Julie Hart, and this is the podcast where we stop to wonder if we are truly grasping the lessons our canine companions could teach us. I'm a dog rehabilitator, here with something you may not know. The greatest teachers about dogs aren't necessarily human, they're actually the dogs themselves. At What Dogs Have Taught Me, we dive deep into the educational, practical, and sometimes controversial aspects of understanding our canine companions. Whether you're a seasoned dog trainer, devoted rescuer, loving foster parent, or simply someone who shares their life with the dog, this podcast is for you. So whether you're looking to deepen your understanding of dog behavior, refine your training techniques, or simply revel in the magic of all things dog, you're in the right place. Let's have a heart-to-heart. This time, I'm doing a joint podcast with the Canine Human Relationship Institute crew. Bree and Angela are joining me, along with Nelson Hodges, who is the founder of the Canine Human Relationship Institute. Bree did a lovely intro and she described the podcast beautifully, so I'm just going to use hers and hope you enjoy.
Today's conversation is a powerful and important one. It brings me great excitement to introduce to you two industry leaders in canine behavior, Julie Hart and Nelson Hodges. In this episode, they explore one of the most misunderstood populations of canines, fearful and feral dogs. Together, they unravel misconceptions, diving deep into what a fearful and feral dog is, what makes them different from other dogs, and what these dogs need from their human companions. This is insight you won't find anywhere else. Julie also shares details about her upcoming original fearful and feral dog workshop, taking place in Las Vegas, New Mexico, May 11th to 12th, 2026. This workshop is an immersive experience designed for working canine professionals, rescue and shelter staff, dedicated owners, and foster families ready to build trusting bonds with fearful and feral dogs. For more information, you can visit the show notes below for the link to register.
We are super excited for this opportunity to talk with you both. Golly, Nelson's been working with fearful and feral dogs for how many years now? 40 plus? 50?
50, about 50 years.
And Julie, you've been, you're at 15, 16 years now?
I think I'm 16 years now with fearful dogs, but the feral dogs is more like 6.
Okay.
So I kind of worked my way up too.
Yeah. And that started with, the Fearful Feral Dog workshop back in, 2019, right?
Yes.
And speaking of Fearful Feral Dog workshop, just to touch on that, we are having that again. Julie's teaching that workshop at the Las Vegas, New Mexico Animal Shelter, May 11th and 12th. And then last year you did an immersion program with 5 students. You're doing it again this year for May. Well, that includes, you have to go to the Fearful Feral Dog workshop first, and then it follows up through the 16th with the immersion program, 5 students. There's only 1 spot available. Is that spot still available, Julie?
Still available for the immersion program. And then the 2-day has, it's kind of has a lot of spots.
Right. Now, just can you give a little bit of, so the workshop is a group of students working at the shelter with the dogs that we've been doing since 2019. And I say we, the Canine Human Relationship Institute with Nelson, we started it back in 2019. But the immersion, do you want to just touch on a couple of points, what that looks like what happens with the immersion program?
Well, it's actually Nelson gave me the idea because he does something similar, but it's living with a feral dog in a house for 5.5 days. And you're responsible for, taking the dog out to potty, you sleep in the same room with the dog. But then we also do a lot of confidence building activities. In New Mexico, there's a lot of outdoor stuff. And so we do a lot of hiking. Last year, we also went to Kelly Engel's house and people got to work with her horses a little bit, which is requires a similar presence and energy. And so you get to kind of experience what it takes to connect with a dog at a primal level. Dogs that really don't want to be with you. They don't want to take food from you. They don't want to play with you. So what do you do to connect with those dogs? And, what this has done for me is helped me train all dogs better, because I can now connect with almost any dog, whether they take food or not, and, typical training methods work or not. I can teach that. And also, I will say that the clients I've been working with lately enjoy it more.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as like, sit down, stay calm, repetition kind of training. They actually get to go and interact with their dog and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And they can see the change right away. So it's very rewarding for them too. So people say, oh, but I don't work with feral dogs. It's like, well, you can still learn a ton that you can apply to your training business overall that will help your business and your clients.
Yeah,
right.
I always recommend for any trainer, professional trainer, or anyone who, frankly, in rescues or people who foster, et cetera, who have a lot of dogs and end up with a fearful animal of any type, to either take this in person if possible, or the online version, which includes 4 years of videos of us working with dogs and talking and all that. Both are extremely helpful. But what it does is it gives you an idea of how to reach that dog. And that dog is different than a different dog because its motivations are different on survival. And that's really what it's all about, is reaching that dog on its level, not on your level. It's not about what you want. You will not gain the trust of that dog. And so what it teaches you as a trainer or as a foster or working in shelters is to understand communication toward you that you have to read. And I think that's the biggest thing that people can gain from working with fearful and feral dogs, is you get an immediate reaction. You lift your hand like this, and across the room that dog is doing this. You start learning what all of your actions, behaviors, your attitude, your intent, and your posture mean to those dogs. And it's not just those dogs, it's every dog. Every dog has the same understanding of humans or not. And so when you behave certain ways, you don't realize that you're either providing a negative or a positive toward that dog. And there's no better way to learn what that is than through a fearful feral animal, because they'll tell you immediately whether it's good or not. There's no faking it. So.
And they respond. It's easier to see their response because it's more extreme, I think, than, like, let's say a dog who's lived in a home with humans but still may be a little like head shy or something. That people may not think that's much, but if you actually watch a lot of quote unquote pet dogs, they actually don't like people putting their hands over their head, and things like that. So making clients aware and people aware of that can really help make that dog just a little more comfortable. And I think, let's see, how do I put this? When I was writing all this stuff down, I realized how much of it is actually on the human. Whereas, a lot of training is we do something, but the dog does something else, right? Like we present a treat, we want the dog to do something, or we correct a dog, we want the dog to stop doing something. But when I was writing all this stuff down, I realized I'm like, oh my God, like 90% of my book is what the person needs to do to help that dog, not what we want the dog to do to help us. So it was just interesting to write it all down and see how big it was. And actually, if we change our behavior, then we don't really need to quote unquote train the dog that much. That part's super easy. So
who does the knowledge go to when you take a class or a course or study? It goes to you. So the onus is on you first.
Yeah, it was cool. This weekend, I went up to Colorado to Cortez to train a feral dog that our rescues had there for a year.
How'd that go?
Oh, fantastic. I mean,
yeah,
the foster did great. I mean, she was, she understood. And this is another thing I find too, when I explain things to people, and actually people in rescue, they've watched a lot of dogs. They may not exactly know what every little thing means, but if you, like this lady, I think has 7 dogs in her house. So I can explain, well, when your dog sees something and goes and stares at it, all the other dogs go and look at it. She's like, yeah. And I said, well, you need to do that too. Or they think you don't know that it's there. And she was
or
like,
don't care. Yeah.
Or don't care. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, you're right. How do they know that I know my neighbor's getting in his truck and driving away? So that I find, that part with people who have been around a lot of dogs, but may not know how to help, like these severe cases, that part's easy. But where was I going with this?
We were talking about that dog specifically that you went to Colorado and helped with.
In the course, I did 4 sessions with that dog, about 2 hours each over 3 days. And the difference was that dog went from not wanting to be walked on a leash, of course, which is the fun part, right? And then, basically not wanting to be near people because she had the support system of the other dogs there. She was living fine. She was with the pack and going outside and getting fed, and she had dog companionship, but of course, she didn't want much to do with the people. And so she can't be adopted that way. Well, at least shouldn't be adopted that way. And so my part was to come in and help her see the people as better, more valuable. And by the end, after the first session, she was walking around the yard, and then we started sniffing things, and that just is a game changer. And then the last session, we took her to a local park. So, like the difference you can make in a short amount of time is really huge. And people think these dogs take years and years and years, and you have to wait months and months to walk the dog on a leash, for example. So anyway, that's one of my little preaching points, that I want to try and educate people that you don't need to wait that long.
That's correct, but you need to know what you're doing with the dog, what your intent is, and your intent isn't about you; it's for the dog. So you really have to understand dogs deeply. But the way you learn that is to stop worrying about the human side of things and feeling sorry for the dog. You cannot help something that you feel sorry for. You cannot help it. That's like you going to the hospital and you're cut open and somebody doesn't want to sew you up because they feel sorry for you, and I don't want to hurt you more. So
that's a good example.
Yeah, this is a
really good example, though.
Well, yeah. So you just leave them there
to rot and get infected,
and that's kind of what happens with dogs.
Yeah,
because people don't understand the mindset, the psychology, the real psychology of dogs, I'll put it that way, what goes on in their brain, how that works, how they think, not how you think. And there are similarities, but there are great differences too. So, yep.
Because a lot of people will avoid the hard work. And Julie, when you were talking, you kind of gave a laugh of, that's the fun part, after you said, get the leash on a dog. And so many people take that for granted when they just have their dog from puppyhood that gets a leash and a collar on and is okay with that.
But when you get these cases in, as you know, that is not how that situation is just going to go smoothly. So when you're working in that, could you elaborate a bit more for the people that maybe don't have experience with that whole interaction of you have a dog, pushing them to their edge, nothing more than they're ready for? As Nelson said, you must know what you're working with and where to help support them. But ultimately, could you talk a bit more about that edge? And as Nelson mentioned, you can't feel sorry for an organism you're wanting to help, and how difficult that is for people to grapple with.
So my whole thought process on it is, and this is substantiated in humans, is that if you allow the dog to develop a fearful behavior, it becomes ingrained. The brain myelinates those neural pathways, and it not only becomes it's a physical thing that becomes very efficient in the dog, and then it also becomes a way that they feel safe is to retreat or resist, and then the people stop. And so then that's a huge reward for the dog. And so I find that if we change that behavior as fast as possible without causing irreparable harm, of course, we get the dog to completely change their whole thought process and to start to be braver. And so then we're building braver behaviors instead of the dog constantly building more fearful behaviors and getting better and better at it. So, but a lot of people are really afraid. And that's why I called Nelson originally, right? And I'm not saying everyone should go out and try and leash train a feral dog. Like, you do have to know what you're doing, and you do have to practice. And if you're not sure how, I do have some videos out there. You can practice the techniques on a regular dog, or even a human, and before you actually try with a dog. But that whole process is it's scary for people to watch, and they get alarmed because it looks like the dog is going to hurt themselves. It's like a bucking bronco, basically, or Tasmanian devil on the cartoon, right? Or an alligator, or whatever you want to call it. But all they're really trying to do is get away. And like Nelson says, basically I'm just standing there waiting for them to calm down and realize, okay, wait, I can't get loose. So now what? Now what are my options? Because that option doesn't work. So what else can I do? And you can actually see them kind of go, oh, wait, I have to think now. What else are my options? And people think that the dog's thresholds are so low. I find that, this whole thing, dogs can't tolerate stress, and oh my God, you're going to make it aggressive, or you're going to cause it to be more afraid. Dogs would not be as successful in the world if they were this fragile. And especially these dogs, because they're living out on the streets of Las Vegas, New Mexico, and they have to survive. Yeah. These are not fragile creatures. They're very resilient. They're very intelligent. And the minute you take away an option from them, they're like, oh, wait, this is different. Now what? And so then I can start teaching the dog once you get through that little freak out. And honestly, it lasts maybe, 3 to 5 minutes at first. And then there's little spurts that lessen and lessen over time. So, but the key is to watch the dog and actually respond to what the dog's doing, not what you think the dog's doing or what you think you should do. So, Nelson.
So here's a couple of details. First of all, don't stand there and stare at the dog. Staring at the dog is a threat. You turn and you face the way you want to go. And once the dog sees it, and first of all, they don't want to, they feel trapped, and that is not safe in their minds. Feral dogs, they don't need you to exist. They don't want to be around humans other than to gain food or whatever else. And urban feral dogs, like what they get there a lot in that, there's others that live out on the landscape out there in New Mexico, but it's pretty tough life. So the urban feral dogs in the city, they have their own neighborhoods. They know food sources because they can smell everything, and et cetera, et cetera. Plus, they know shelter and they know where water is available for them. And water isn't too available out in the high desert in New Mexico, so that's why there's so many of the urban dogs. But here's the key, guys. It's you are trying to. Why should that dog bother with you? Because it didn't need humans to exist. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to match up with that dog and show it that it's better to survive together. Now, how can you get from one spot of, I don't need humans, I'm afraid of them, or I'm very wary of them, not even afraid, and to the point where they see you as an asset? And believe it or not, I don't think I've ever worked with a dog that within 15 to 20 minutes, I don't have that basic level, period. And it's because I don't force things. What I do is I'll show an indication, and this is where if you have a dog on a leash and it's the first time and it's trying to pull away or get a dart away from you and it's testing, all it's doing is testing, where's that edge? Don't ever push a dog over the edge. You want to push the dog towards a goal, but that goal has to make sense for the dog, not just you. It's not about your convenience. So when you do that, you're not standing there facing the dog, because now they're really trying to get away from you, because your intent is all about them instead of let's go this way together. Now the dog's trying to do all of this stuff and you don't change. You're nonplussed by all of their actions. Then they start calming down, going, okay, well, I'm safe back here for the moment. And that's all you're trying to do, is get those momentary pauses. And the conversation is always in the pause. Why? Because the dog is just doing survival aspects, its lower brain. So when it pauses, then it has to think. That's the point Julie was talking about. Now it's got to think, okay, how do I get out of this? Or what is the cooperation that leads me to a better outcome? And so if I take a step and I wait for the dog, not putting the additional tension, I'm indicating, let's go this way. I teach all of this, sorry for overlaying, I teach all this in the leash handling class that I created, because I saw such a lack of understanding of basic leash handling throughout the professional world anymore. Back in the day, that was all we had to work with, 40, 50 years ago, other than the light up your gun dog, half a mile away to make it come back. And that was about all that they had. It was either an on or off switch for an e-collar. And those have gotten very sophisticated and actually can be used very well if you know what you're doing. They can also be used poorly. So it isn't about the tool. But a leash, then being able to use it correctly and have that touch, that feel. It's like the difference of you driving a car and wanting to turn that corner at 50 miles an hour when the car doesn't want to, it just want to keep going straight, and you're doing this. No, I'm going to force you. Well, you're not going to. Instead, slow down, see what's ahead, rotate the vehicle correctly on its capabilities. And that's what you're doing with a dog, on its capabilities in the time that it allows. All you want to do is reach that first level, first time. You're not trying to get a dog to love you and take treats from you and sleep in your bed and all that stuff. And most of those, especially feral dogs, will never be that pet dog. They will be something different, sometimes better in many ways, because they respect what's important. So you're really just trying to find a common ground with that dog in those first few moments. And once you can get that trust and follow and stop and lower yourself next to it and look out with it, not at it. That's a main key. So anyway, I'll shut up.
It's really insightful. You spoke about trust. You spoke about becoming a companion of importance and relevance. And I know in that immersion program with Julie Hart, that is what you teach and how to do it, as well as your courses too, Nelson. Could you both discuss a bit about trust, what that means, what begets it? Safety is a word you used. And you also chatted about how people will bring their dog home, put them in their bed, give them love, give them treats. You guys maybe both touch on perhaps why that's not the best option when bringing these animals into their home to gain trust.
Want me to go first? All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, so I gave a presentation this summer that made me really think about this, because it was on trust. And how do you describe it? What is it? How do you get it? And so I did a lot of research into how people do this with each other. And it is not those things. It is not giving things, material things. It's not even like these, retreats for work where you go and like fall into people's arms, right? That stuff doesn't actually build trust. And what does is people know you got their back. You're going to show up and do what you say you're going to do. You're consistent in that. You mean them no harm, of course, and you have their best interest at heart. So it's quite how we got from, yes, Nelson.
One other main element, composure.
Composure, yes.
No emotions about it, because human emotions are all over the place all the time. And if you show emotions and frustration, what happens, and fussing with the dog, fussing with the leash, fussing with everything, you are scatterbrained. Basically, you're non-trustable, period. It doesn't matter what your other intent is. Without that composure, you first, the dog will not compose itself either. So,
yeah, there's actually, I think it's Brian Morris wrote an article, and one of their components for trust is logic. So it's the same thing, right? Logical brain instead of an emotional brain. If you're logical, you're assessing things appropriately. You're not reacting for no reason. This is actually why I think dogs are put on this earth, to help us with this part of ourselves.
I agree.
Because people are very emotional, and if you have to stop and not be that way for your dog, to me it's easier than if you just have to not be that way for yourself. It gives you exterior motivation, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this feels so much better. Mm-hmm. It's not saying like don't feel emotions, but it's at certain times you have to be able to go, okay, this dog, freaking out is not you're not going to react emotionally to that and start freaking out with the dog. Like, that's not going to help. And a lot of people do, like Angela, you were just saying, the dog got on the table and they started freaking out. And then the whole thing just escalated into a big mess.
Snowballed. Yes.
Right? So probably if they would have just been like, dog's on the table, let's just walk away, the dog would have gotten down.
Yeah.
Yeah. The human emotions are an anathema to dogs, because they don't have the same levels of emotions. They do have base emotions, yes, of course. We see that. We see the observations of it. But the way their brains are constructed, and for the amount of time that they have on Earth in their lifetime, it makes no sense to have constructed emotions that it takes years to develop. makes no sense for them to exist in that way as an animal, period. So
I will say one emotion I usually have is like, I don't know if you want to call it love or caring for every dog I work with. Oh, where'd he go?
Compassion, maybe?
Compassion. Yeah, that's a good word, right?
Yep.
Because if you don't have that for the dog, then you're not going to have empathy. You're going to be in more of a competing brain, perhaps, than a compassionate brain. And so that's one thing as soon as you look in their eyes, it's easy for me. Not that I look in their eyes a lot, but you know what I mean? Like that little glance. And they're like, you're like, oh, look at them, and that sort of compassion, like, I want to help you. So that I think can go a long way, but it has to be true and not for the person to get what they need out of it. That can come later.
Or you can just have one emotion like me.
Yeah, or none.
I would say maybe to, just touch on an example that was given by Nelson earlier, and what can break trust. Just so for our listeners, so they understand, an action that can break trust is turning around and watching and staring at the dog. That's definitely not going to build any trust whatsoever, because in the dog's mind, why are you watching me? Are you coming to get me? Are you coming to kill me? Right? So that's an example. What are some other examples would you two like to share of things, practical applications of things that people can do that a fearful or feral dog might do that we humans can do differently to help build that trust? Travel was another one, right? Travel, go in a certain direction that the dog's facing rather than looking at it. Turn and go the other way or step the other way. Now, are you going to just take off and walk and drag the dog behind you? No, we're not going to do that, because that loses trust, right? We're going to wait for that dog to step or look with, right? So can you guys just elaborate a little bit more on some practical applications of behaviors, actions that we may do to help build that trust with a dog that is fearful and feral?
Okay. Well, I'll start on this one then. So one of the main things that you want to do is not be in your own head. You have to be with that dog. If you're in your own head, you think of something and you go, oh, quick motions, movement, you're completely unaware of everything around you, the environment, which includes the dog. Everything outside of you is the environment. And if you go inside of your own brain and start thinking even for a microsecond, you've lost the dog right then, and you've lost the context of what the dog has to live in. So when you react to something, even a quick step or a movement or a quick, oh, I forgot this, you destroyed trust, because now that dog it's watched humans from afar, but now it's tied to you literally and figuratively. And when you do these actions, it has to recoil away to save itself from that aberrant behavior. And that's what it is. It's an aberrant behavior. So one of the things that you can do, once again, maintain your composure. That doesn't mean an act. That means keep your brain focused on this environment with the dog. So you're trying to show the dog the universe as a partner, not as an overlord. And so this is a hard thing for most humans, especially to because you want to change the dog. So you think you have to control the dog, and that's not it. You actually have to become a partner, an equal partner to it, showing it these different aspects that we can exist together. And Angela, you mentioned the motion, the direction. Movement is a reward for any animal. So movement, if you can move, you can survive. You can get away or you can go toward. And so that's one of the things that sharing motion and movement together is one of the most critical elements that you can do initially with that dog and continue through its life. Dogs travel together. They are pack animals, regardless of what modern pseudoscience is saying or cherry-picked stuff. They are pack animals. Pack is what we describe as a social unit. They are social animals. That's why they can get along with us. So we're social animals. They're social animals. Otherwise, you'd have a lizard. They're not pack animals. They're not social animals. We're more herd-like than pack-like. So pack to them is a limited number. Herd to us is a city or a country or the whole globe. Dogs don't think that way. You have to understand how dogs think to reach that dog, and that's part of it. So the brain itself is your friend or your enemy, your own, because you have to act in certain ways, and I don't mean acting. You have to behave in certain ways that initially help that dog understand that you're not a threat to it, that you're just asking it to come along. And asking is not, basically it's not, will you go with me? And if the answer is no, of course the answer is going to be no initially. Then you outweight the dog to say, well, let's just take a step together. Because you're not asking for what they call total permission. It isn't. It's, well, if here's the way out is to go with me rather than pull on this leash behind, because it's not going anywhere, and neither am I. And so if I stand there fairly stoic and just outweight you, which a human can do if they don't have their ego involved. A human can always outweight a dog. Otherwise, you give up and you start pulling the dog around and try to dominate it and command it to do these things, which is not gaining trust. So I hope that answers a little bit of what you were asking.
Julie, would you like to give a few examples, practical things that you do as well? I think, what Nelson touched on obviously is spectacular, because having practiced this for several years, it is important that you are present in the moment with the dog, clearly there and not worried about all the other things going on in your mind. Where do I have to be next? What's going on? How do they think about me? What does this look like? Which is what happens to us humans, right? And I did want to touch on one thing that you mentioned, and Nelson, you talked about it again too, with the leash. Julie, you touched on the leash and how the dog can be alligator rolling and thrashing about and whatnot, and turning around, facing the other way, and outweighting the dog. Basically, what's happening there, because we touched on survival earlier too, right? When we wait and we just take that time because we want what's best for the dog, we're waiting for the dog, we're waiting for them to realize survival is best if you move with me. And they realize that thrashing about and that kicking about is not going to allow them to continue to survive, because they can't survive that way. They're going to exhaust themselves or choke themselves out. And they're not going to let that happen. And that's how we get even that just one step, right, of them moving with us, where we go, yeah, right, that we move forward. So that is a great example. Julie, I know one thing you have trademarked with what you do with people and their dogs is being nose-centric, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about, because that's some practical application and things that people can do when they're struggling with a fearful and feral dog. You want to explain some of those activities or things that you do with the dog to show that, hey, we're interested in what you're doing and we're trying to become a trusted partner with you.
Yeah. So I named kind of my whole system no-centric because it's based on dogs' natural behaviors and us doing their natural behaviors with them. And of course that, it builds trust because you're being empathetic, you're mirroring the dog, you're acknowledging what's important to the dog. And also, just to touch on what Nelson said too, being present with a dog or with a person or in whatever you're doing is very rewarding for the person too. So if you learn how to do that, and of course I consider this a lifelong quest to be good at it. It's like it's a practice. You will never reach the end, but it's very addictive. I'm like, when can I go to the shelter again so I can just be present? I mean, of course I could do it whenever, but doing that with the dogs gives me just like this quiet time and there's nothing else going on in my brain, so it's meditative. So anyway, but back to your question. So for example, this weekend with this little dog, she was a red Aussie, like red, like an Irish setter, red Aussie mix.
She was cute. You sent me the picture. She was cute.
Right? And very resistant to partake because she hadn't had to do anything with the humans in the house to survive. And so she was also surviving in the house for a year without having to actually interact with the humans. And I'm like, I get it because this information isn't readily available. And the lady did everything she knew how to do. But if you can start changing things right away and teaching the dog, like, hey, you're going to survive better if you're cooperating and being a team with me versus being a team with just the dogs in my house. So, so what we did after the dog learned how to walk on a leash is I took a few things I had in my car that had a lot of stinky dog smells on them, like a towel from a crate and an old leash. And I've also used, herbs, tea bags and whatever. And you don't need to necessarily lay a course, but for this dog, I did because she had already been in this environment so much that I wanted something super novel in that environment for me to lead her to. And so I put these things around the area we had done the walking before, and I showed her, with my body, like, hey, look at this thing. This thing's really interesting. And she was like, you're right, it is. She's like, well, this is cool. So, I mean, like right there, you form a communication with the dog, right? You're forming a connection. Like you're basically communicating with an animal that has no concept of being with humans or having any kind of relationship with them. And to me, it's like a huge icebreaker, right? Mm-hmm. Once the dog does that, there's usually a huge change in the dog's kind of attitude. Like, oh, maybe this person isn't so bad. Maybe I should follow them. But I use it all the time. Of course, with my own dogs, once they've been here, I don't use it as often as I do a new dog that I'm rehabbing. But, the dogs I have here, they were out in the kitchen. And the way I got the little Tasmanian devil to calm down was to be like, hey, look in these cabinets. What's this thing? Hey, let's smell some cinnamon. And I put all these things on the floor. And because, sniffing and stuff calms the vagus nervous system, she made huge strides in like 20 minutes. And I actually did. I was like, no, you can't leave the kitchen. That's the only rule, right? You can't leave the kitchen. You can interact with me or not. And she chose to interact with me. But she really did want to leave the kitchen and run back to her crate, which was safe. But after that initial 20 minutes, now she'll come in the kitchen and walk around and do her own thing. So, I mean, it just makes such a huge difference to do something the dog finds valuable. Right. It's not always sniffing. Like I sent you guys a picture of Tipton and Midnight this morning on a walk. And Tipton's way of survival is to watch. He likes to look. He's very eye oriented. That doesn't mean he doesn't sniff. He does. But if he's in a new location, he's watching. And then Midnight's way is sniffing. Like anywhere new she goes, she's almost like obsessive about sniffing. And so I'm going to engage with those two dogs in different ways. With Tipton, I'm going to make sure I acknowledge and look a lot more. And with Midnight, I'd make sure that I sniff a lot more. One very easy practical thing people can do is go out in the yard with your dog.
Yeah.
Like, don't just send them out by themselves to brave the world and defend the property, right? So every morning I get my coffee and we go walk the perimeter of my fence line. And, even if you don't have a big yard, maybe you live in a townhouse and you have a little yard, you can still go out there with your dog and, kind of look around, sniff the air a little bit, do what your dog's doing. And that helps them know that you are interested in their safety and you're part of the pack protection, because a social group is about survival of the group too. And if you're not involved in that, doesn't mean you have to go around like fighting everybody, but you're not involved in keeping a lookout, then you're not a valuable member. But that's a super easy thing people can do. I think even if you live in an apartment, you can kind of walk around the apartment, look out the windows. There's always something new going on. And your dog may notice it more because they can smell it and you can't. So if you notice your dog sniffing something, you're like, hey, what is that? Go over to that corner and be like, what are you smelling? So that only takes, 5 minutes. But it makes a big difference.
Those are all significant things that can make a change. And, just going back to what we were saying earlier, that, these actions and tips that we're giving for, that you use with fearful and feral dogs, this also applies to, pet dogs, right? That people just kind of take for granted because they sleep on the sofa or the couch or their bed or whatever and just coexist nicely and they live fine with their dogs, but they're really kind of ignoring what's important to the dog. And they can become so much more valuable in the relationship with their dog if they just take that moment to check out the world with their dog in their backyard. And it's not work, because it's not training work. It's just everyday life, little things that you can do to enjoy the experience with your dog and start creating a really lovely partnership, right? And both are great examples that you gave, and Nelson. Go ahead, Nelson.
So I'll kind of sum all of that up is, are you relevant to your dog?
Right.
And if you don't do things with, around, and for your dog, you're not relevant. And that includes every aspect of their life. So engagement, the proper engagement, is the most important thing. You're not important because you say so. That's the human ego.
Mm-hmm. Stick
your ego in your back pocket and actually work with that dog. And by work, I don't mean heavy work, but engagement. Engagement is the most important thing to that dog. It's not the tricks, it's not the treats, it's you. And, you can get off your duff for a few minutes instead of sitting there watching TV at night for hours on end with your mouth open. Okay? Get up and do stuff. And you'll be healthier mentally and physically. So, sorry. I'm pretty direct sometimes.
I think there's a couple of things that Julie said that resonate with routine, and not routine as a checklist of I do these specific things. In a way, kind of, but there's more context. And what I'm referencing is the perimeter walk that you do each morning, the going out to go and look for food, locating resources. Those are predictable. Those increase relevancy. And quick, short little caveat to add to that, I had a very fearful dog come through, and I would say she was here for about 4 days. I don't believe that she trusted me as a relationship, but I was able to cultivate safety in our daily routine that dog, when it bit off a leash and ran away, it came back 9 hours later. I put this whole rescue thing together. Nelson, I contacted you about it. And I strictly believe it was because of the way that I lived with that dog for that many days, and it wasn't a lot, that she felt safe enough to come back to this perimeter, to this location. And she just waited outside the kennel room. So there was no trust in that I could just walk right up to her, that she would just come right to me. But there was trust in the safety of this location that she could predict upon. And she came back. So I just think that is huge. And I feel that, not many people would put those dots together and go, yeah, that's the dog felt safe to come back. So I'm sure you guys had stories of that too, but I just thought that was really neat to add.
Yeah,
Nice.
I will tell you that a lot of the dogs that quote unquote run away could be a lot of them. Actually, most of the people that have contacted me, and this is literally throughout the United States and Canada, that have contacted me over years of time, knowing that I've done, a lot of search and rescue and recovery of humans, dogs, stuff like that. And so I understand the psychology of what goes on literally hour by hour in a dog and how that changes. So how long the dog is gone, why it was gone in the first place. Did it just escape to do a run around, a fun run around the neighborhood like a husky does? Or, is it new to that house? Is it a newly adopted dog that may be fearful in the first place? And I've gotten a lot of those, and we've always recovered them. And some of them have been in extreme situations, like Ontario, Canada, in the dead of winter with severe, low temperatures. And, that dog had to be found or it would freeze to death. So, we're always able to get them back. And part of that is getting people to understand, what does that dog trust of humans? What is it? One dog, actually in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, I spent 2 months helping those people get that back. It was an LGD, which, for those who don't know what that is like basically a Great Pyrenees, a very large one. That's a guardian dog breed. And it got out. It was exactly that situation where it was new to that house, and somehow it got out, and it went on from the city out into the country, which wasn't, it's not, those aren't huge cities in the Okanagan. So, and, you've got the Rocky Mountains there. Well, it's up in the mountains then, in forests. And so it kind of lit in an area where we were able to keep it steady and safe by offering it a particular area of water and food on a regular basis. And that person then that I worked with became important and became part of its pack. So when they didn't show up one day, the dog actually tracked them down 8 miles over and came into their backyard because it missed its pack member, and it knew where it came from the smell. So it's becoming relevant, guys. That's what matters to that dog.
That's a good ending. That's circling. Oh, sorry, Julie.
Well, I was going to have Nelson explain what the difference is between feeding a dog from a bowl, or even, a lot of people with fearful dogs, they'll feed them by hand, which I'm not saying I would never do it, but I actually haven't had to do it very often. And I might do it just for specific behaviors, to get it used to, a leash going over its head when it's out of the crate, or like I don't know, something like that. Versus, what we're talking about, survival, people might say, well, I'm feeding the dog, I'm giving it food, it has to have food to survive. And so I'm giving it from my hand. But from what I can tell, that actually can erode trust. So I'll give you guys an example. I had Taz out in the kitchen and I was cooking. And so before that, she was kind of coming up to me and following me around. And I'm working on like being able to reach out and grab her leash and touch her when she's not contained. And so she was doing pretty well with that. But then I gave her this little piece of meat or something. And then after that, she's like, oh no, now you can't touch me. And it took me a couple more tries to try and get her back to where she was before I gave her the food. And I was like, what just happened? Right?
Yeah.
And I think my agreement with her changed in that moment.
Yeah. Well, your agreement with her changed because she had a different idea about it. And that's what people need to understand is the dog is a sentient being that has its own thoughts about what's right and wrong. It gives you something, it expects something in return sometimes. So it's negotiating with people just like people negotiate with people. And every dog does that. Most dogs are generally just receptive. I'll call them the 60% of the dogs in the center that are normal pet dogs. And then you get the 40%, 20% at each end of the scale, so to speak, that become more and more and more severe. And they have a different idea. They're not just going along to get along. They see it all as survival, and that's a natural aspect frankly, of the differences in all animals and their brains, what their personalities are. So you generally get 60, 70% in the center that can get along and just want to go along and get along to survive well. And then you got others that have a different idea about it. Now, unfortunately, we create that a lot in humans with dogs because, we have a genetic aspect of fear or anxiety or aggression, has to aggress because of those things. Rarely do you have aggression, for instance, just outright that's unreachable, I will say. And that would be an area where literally out of about 10,000 dogs, 9 were that way that I've worked with. That's it. Almost unreachable. But that was a genetic or brain issue versus normal behaviors. Now, you asked about the difference between feeding, hand feeding, and bowl feeding. So I'll try to make this brief because this can be a very long story, which is at the time, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 15 years ago, I had 3 dogs all at the same time that were the worst, most fearful dogs. 2 of them came out of a horrible puppy mill up in northern Missouri that got found out. They put down, I think, all 300 of the dogs except for these 2. And they weren't any better than the others. They just happened to get a rescue up in Iowa that said they would take them. And so I worked with them over the phone, online, etc. for about 9 months, and they made, that much progress, but they were still feral, extremely feral dogs. And so I agreed to take them on, knowing that they weren't going to get any better in those conditions. So brought them home and made them part of the pack. But these were probably the only 2 dogs that needed that. So for the first 2 months or so, I had to hand feed them every meal. And of course, the first time I'd take the bowl out, and they were both outside. They would never come inside. And I wasn't going to force them to do so. So they were in the backyard, and the rest of my pack and behavior cases were inside eating meal. So I'd close the door so that they wouldn't interrupt it, because I knew I would have to throw food at them because they were 80 feet away from me. They didn't want to be in as far away as possible. And so I'd throw food 70 feet, and they'd come in and grab it and run back. And, this went on for about a week, till, each time they'd kind of take a step forward, then I'd throw it 10 feet in front towards me. And so that whole process took about a week for one dog. The other dog, which they were related in some way, they both looked alike. The other one, it took another week observing. This one didn't die once it came up to me. So she was always the one that was behind the other one. And of course, the first time, Mika came up, I had my hand out like this, and I'd turn my head. I had the bowl in my lap. I'd do this, and I'd reach out, and she came up, and she'd go, staring at me, and go boom, and of course it'd scatter, all over the place, and she'd run off, scare herself, and then I'd let her come back and pick up the pieces off the ground, and I'd have to throw a few at Sana behind her, 10 feet away. So that week, it was that same thing the next day, and it was less and less, and then finally she'd start grabbing, and just having that touch, that smell of my hand, and the touch itself, and beginning to be much more sensitive about caring whether or not she hurt me or caused something. More for survival to begin with. Obviously, she didn't want to get hurt either. But then later, it wasn't affectionate touch. It was just, okay, we're together here. And that took about 3 weeks of that. But then Sana finally came up, and the week after the initiation of Mika, and same thing. She boom, scared her to death, and she'd come up and pick up a few pieces and stuff. So did that for, I think, 3 months, hand feeding them. Those were the only dogs that I had to do. I absolutely had to do that. And then we got to a point where I put the food bowl down, and I kept moving my seat back from in the yard back towards the back door. And then I sat it down, and I finally sat the bowls down on either side of me, and then they'd come and eat. So then they knew it was, that's your bowl, which is a very important rule that I always get to. No dogs get to look at another dog's bowl, much less go over to it. That causes so many problems. So, and then I'd remove myself, put the bowls down, and I'd have the back door open. So they were right there at the threshold. Week there, a week just inside, so they'd have to stick their head over the threshold. And then from time to time, the back door would be open, and I'd be up in the front of the house, and I'd see Mika kind of come in, walk around, stare, look down, and then go back out in the yard. So she was experimenting. And eventually Sana was doing the same thing. So a week right inside the threshold, and then a week inside about 7 feet, not in the circle that I normally feed the dogs, but just that placement. So it's that progression. You do it as you see them become comfortable to that progression of now becoming part of the pack. Because they were a pack on their own, and predators don't like to share territory with 2 packs. So that was dangerous for them to be separate. And that's what people have to understand. Those are the only 2 that I really had to hand feed that way. From time to time, I would have to do it maybe for a single meal just to get a dog to eat, to show them, it's okay. Don't worry about that dog over there. If I'm there, the other dogs aren't going to come over. So, does that help?
Well, I was more, because most of the people that clients and rescue people and everything, the first words out of their mouth is, well, the dog will take food from me, but.
Yeah.
And so to me,
because they have to.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way that they get food. But that doesn't engender trust in the way people think.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what intent? Sorry, Julie.
Oh, well, there's a disconnect there in how we're thinking of it and how the dog sees it, I think.
Very much so. You always have to look at it from the dog's side. Just because someone has, a candy bar, are you going to run up to it, that person, and take it out of their hand and take a bite and give it back to them and trust them? No. It doesn't matter how many times you see that person, you really don't trust that person. It's, and it's, even though we understand each other more of what our intent is, because we learn to read each other, because we feel the things inside that we see on the outside of someone else. Dogs are slightly different in how they show those, I'll say, emotions or those inner thoughts, that intent. And we certainly are different than they are as far as how we show emotions, and we show too many of them. So they don't trust us because of those things. So just because a dog will take food from your hand, what you want to do is you want to transfer that. If you're doing that, first of all, I don't want to be anywhere near their food to begin with. I want that food to be placed. They show, here's the food bowl. I'm giving you the food. Matter of fact, I mix it by hand, so my scent is in there. I don't have to hold it. So I always put my hand in and I mix the food up. And that's the other part. It's not just kibble. So it's a high value target with protein in it. And so, of course, they're going to eat it, because that's probably the best food they've ever had in their lives. So use the bowl itself as your surrogate, because if a dog's fearful of you, you standing right there, that's a tough pill to swallow. If you put it down, you have your scent in it, and you move away and show it's yours, I'm not going to bother it. Stop sticking your hand in it. Then the dog actually trusts that sequence and that pattern. Now, as you are able to, bring the dog closer to you with the food and then ignore it, it's not about the feeding the dog. The feeding ritual is, let's go out together, let's do some things. You've earned it because you've hunted for the food. Here's your food, and it's yours. I don't want to put any caveats on you getting fed. That was your reward for doing these other things. So I think people flip the whole script by, okay, you earn your food by coming to me. No, unless you're the prey, that's not how predators do it, guys. Okay.
Is that what you were going to say about the intent, Bree?
Yes, I was going to ask if that psychological pressure of what's in the person's mind makes a huge difference on how that dog receives it. Yeah. And to your point, a lot of individuals will come in and want something in return for that giving the food.
They also want to be loved by the dog. And you're not going to get that. You get affection, you get trust first, and then affection in the way they can over a long period of time of being trustworthy. If you're not trustworthy, if you're holding back on things, if you want, it's not about you, it's not about your ego, it's not about what you want. What you want should be the best thing for the dog, not from a human standpoint, but to make the dog the best dog it can be.
So can I ask you both a question that's a little different than the food, but can be applied to it? Is consent, what that means, how it's going around in the industry. I know Julie was talking about this a little bit earlier. Nelson, you referenced, I might be paraphrasing, but given permission, and just how this is backwards, because you just explained that psychological trade and agreement of what the individual is wanting, that love. And in the caveat, usually in the same hand, that same individual will want to give that dog consent or ask for consent or ask for permission. You can take that away or add some clarity here, Julie.
Well, consent and how I see it used. Again, I'm not quite in that circle, so I hope I'm not misconstruing what it really is. But for example, someone was posting about touching dogs at the shelter and doing a consent check. And so I'm not sure what that is, but when and it's kind of the same with children, we've really messed up our kids by giving them too much say-so.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, well, I can't make my child do anything. It's like, well, yeah, you can if it's good for the child. Like, you're the adult, you know what's good for this child that they'd have no concept of. So, for example, when I'm working with a feral dog, are they going to consent to having a leash put on them? No, never, never, ever. But I know, because they're in a shelter, I didn't go trap them, right? They've been trapped. They're in a shelter. And if they can't walk on a leash, they're going to die. So I know that that is the best thing for that dog. And I also know that it actually will increase the dog's life very shortly. And within 2 or 3 sessions, the dog's walking and getting exercise and getting out of the shelter and like all kinds of things, right? But the dog can't possibly understand that's the payoff. Because I think if they did understand that's the payoff, they'd be like, yep, put the leash on me, I'm ready.
Agreed.
But they can't, and the same thing like with these dogs I'm working with now, like Paz would have never consented for me to touch her. But I know as a dog in a human world, to get adopted, and I also live in a house without fear with humans, she needs to understand that touch is a good thing. And so, of course, I do it in the most non-confrontational way possible, which for her was challenging. But gradually I teach them like, hey, I know you don't really want me to do this, but it's going to be okay. And it's in your best interest. And so I think we need to balance those two things. Like, I want mental buy-in by the dog, right? Like Nelson was saying, like, I want that dog to be enjoying what we're doing and want to do it in some sort of fashion. I'm not like, I don't want to force myself on the dog, but sometimes you have to start that conversation. You have to make the initial start of that so the dog can go, oh, wait, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. Okay, now I'm okay with you touching me. Like Taz was just getting a little massage this morning and closing her eyes. So we need to be very careful about how this concept's used because it's ending in dogs really suffering.
Yeah. So
my little speech.
So consent. So when it's used from a human emotional aspect or the understanding of humans of consent and what's been modernized with that word is the absolute opposite of what it should be. And there's a ton of sayings out there that I try to boil down a concept into small things, which is, don't tell a dog what to do, ask it, but ask it until you get the right answer. So you don't give up on the dog. But it also puts the onus on you that if you didn't reach that dog with the first request, or, come with me on this leash, that's, a first level request, then the problem may not be the dog. It may be you not communicating in the way that dog understands it. So it puts the onus back on you first again. So you have to have clarity of mind and purpose and the right intent behind it to ask a dog for something. Now, if it's just because of you, what you want, that's the wrong reason, then you're probably not going to get the cooperation. What you're going to get is acquiescence, which is not really, it's used as consent. So that an acquiescence is, I've got to survive, and this big monkey's got me by my neck. So of course I'm going to give, quote, I'm going to acquiesce. So people misinterpret what that is, and then they try to force it beyond a point where that dog is willing to do it. So I think there's a whole genre of, don't use extreme force, and then it's gone to the opposite end of the world. Mm-hmm. And so the words that are selected have been modified in their behavior based on culture, not on actual language. So that's where, yes, you're going to ask a dog to do something, unless, of course, it's about safety and survival. And then you're going to say, no, you got to do this right now because you're about to be run over. So don't go out in that street. I'm not going to ask a dog. I'm going to tell a dog if it needs to, if it's not paying attention to me, come here so you don't get run over. Don't chase that cat across the street when there's a car coming down the street. As a base level thing, I'm looking out for you, and that's what partnership is about. So partnership, if you have that in mind, if you're working with a feral or fearful dog and you have this partnership of, I've got your six, I've got your back, you've got mine, make sure that you understand that dog has the capability of looking out for you too, because it has different senses, capabilities than you do. So you're both partners in survival, and if you can't think that way, you're probably not going to make good progress with that dog. Okay? It's not a cute little fluffy 2-pound toy. They're living sentient beings that their answers are just as correct as all of your answers ever were for them.
Actually better.
In a lot of ways, yeah. So how do you change the mind of a dog that's always got the right answers up to this point? You change the environment, and you're the part of the environment that's the biggest part. So then you end up understanding you have to change the environment in a way that presents a question for them to then think. Okay? And I'm talking in big generalities because we could do hundreds of thousands of examples of the what ifs and how you do it. And sorry, but we can't do that on a podcast. takes some in-person work. It really does.
Well, that's why you have great courses and workshops in person and online through the CHRI Institute. And Julie is writing a book to be the first book that is publicly accessible for individuals that are taking in these dogs, working in shelters, not just canine professionals, but adoptees, fosters, everybody that works with these dogs or puts their hand on them. Plus this immersion fearful dog workshop that you can have 2 days or 4 days. So these are now opportunities for our listeners to go and get curious about and even sign up and be immersive and be hands-on. So this stuff becomes not just theory or talk, it becomes applied in person.
So what I love about Julie, what I love about Julie doing what she's doing, which is taking a part of what we teach and making it a singular expert. And I don't mean singular as she's a one-man band, but that focus into an area that needs to go that deep for many others. And so, Julie, how many books did you find out there, and how much research did you find when you started researching? It's about 0, isn't it?
Feral dogs, 0.
Yeah.
0. There's a few rescues that kind of specialize in them, but I disagree with the timeline that they use because the dogs spend about 2 months in a crate. before they ever get, and I don't know if they're going potty in these crates or what. I've seen that happen, or they live in a barn stall, or something like that, which, I get it at first, like you always need the dog to decompress, but, I think the information is so skewed that we can't put stress on the dogs, that we actually end up, there's temporary stress and then there's continuous stress.
Yeah.
Continuous stress is so much more damaging to health, mental well-being, all kinds of things, than little bursts of, hey, let's walk on a leash. Hey, come sniff this thing with me. Hey, let me touch you for a minute. And the dogs all, are very resilient, and they rebound from that temporary stress, and they learn at lightning speed, actually. So I didn't find any. I think on Fearful Dogs, I found 7 books that I bought, and none of them really talk about trust. And one of them, it took 18 months for the dog not to be scared of the person that wrote the book. So I found that interesting. I wouldn't call that a success story necessarily, because the whole time that dog was scared of the person they lived with.
Yeah. Yeah, even the 3 worst dogs I've ever seen, heard of, or had, and that's in my experience. Even those, within 9 months were just part of the pack coming around, et cetera, and on their own accord coming up to me to be, to have undercoat plucked out and stay safe under my legs in a thunderstorm and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, guys, and it has nothing to do with sit, stay down, place, typical, formulaic. None of it's formulaic. None of it. Not the behavior, not the training, nothing. You're having to figure out each individual, which to me is that is the passion, is to figure out each individual, because then you're gaining the information and the ability to help others better the next time. So rather than you making them conform to you.
And people may think there's not a need for this out there. But I will tell you, there are a lot of people with dogs that fall in this realm. And
I could go. I'm sorry. I could go here I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth, which is 8.2, 8.4 million people and about 3 million dogs, and I will guarantee. And every day, the average number of dogs that are put down at the local municipal shelters every day is 400 on average. Jeez. And I guarantee you, lots of those are fearful. There's a lot of urban feral, and they're very wary of humans. I've helped a lot of people, a lot of trainers locally with the urban feral dogs over the years, and they've gotten to live out their lives instead of being put down instantly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get these dogs, meaning well. They feel sorry for it, or they want to help it, and also the rescues aren't always forthcoming with the severity of the dogs they're giving to people. Yeah. Maybe they give them trazodone before the person picks them up, and they don't look so bad, and all kinds of, I've heard all kinds of things from my clients, but for whatever reason, these people end up with these dogs, and they need help. And then there's the whole reactive dog issue, which this cuts down reactivity by, 75% to 100%, I'd say. Just being aware of your surroundings, acknowledging what's important to the dog, letting the dog know you're aware of things.
And that's even for the best dog you've ever had out there, guys. What you learn from working with these animals, from learning about this, from reading, Julie's book soon and, going to the workshop or, taking it online, any of those things, it will help you with every single dog you ever encounter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Hey, Julie, I'd like to touch on something when you and I were having a conversation, I don't know, maybe about a month ago, and you had read a study, and I don't know if you sent me that copy of that study or where the access is to it in regards to SSRIs and how they can affect olfactory bulb function. So basically smelling, for people that they've never heard of those words before, it's, the dog being able to smell. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and also let us know where we could find that study if we want to dig a little bit deeper?
So I don't think it's one study in particular, and it's always funny when I found out these little tidbits. I'm always like, Angela, guess what I learned? I have to tell someone because I'm like, oh my gosh. So I don't even know how I came across it. I think I was just researching SSRIs, which are serotonin.
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Thank you.
You did great.
Prozac. What else, Bree? What else is in there? Is benzodiazepine?
I think fluoxetine as well as one, the trazodones, anything that is mind altering.
Yeah.
So I was looking up, how this affects dogs basically, but I came across how it affects people. And I could not believe it, that these drugs are well known to decrease olfactory bulb function in people. And there's kind of, when you become depressed, that in itself can inhibit your sense of smell as well. But when you take these drugs, it can also inhibit your sense of smell more, which can cause depression and anxiety. And so during COVID, of course, we saw that lots of people lost their sense of smell and they developed depression and anxiety. They've also done experiments with mice, where they remove their olfactory bulbs and the mice become depressed and anxious. So putting a dog that relies on its sense of smell for its entire world, basically, on a drug that may inhibit its sense of smell, I think it's just something people need to be aware of.
The other aspect of that is the dog does not know or gave permission to be drugged. It doesn't know it. All it knows is everything has changed its entire universe. It's like us going half blind. That's the equivalent. All of a sudden, and it just happened to you. Of course, it's going to alter your mood, even if you are inhibited. Even if you inhibit serotonin, which is one of those sort of feel-good neurotransmitters, hormones in your brain that you sort of think, okay, everything's okay. But it's not okay, and you know that, and therefore the brain itself cannot rectify those things that it lost, and the feel good. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Mm.
It's funny, trainers used to say, well, what book can I read to learn this stuff, Nelson? I'd say, well, I can start you off with 200 books and about 3,000 studies. Start.
They just want one chapter. Just give the spark notes.
Cliff notes for the one book. No, sorry.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, I just found this by chance. I didn't even know it was a thing with people either. I don't think I've ever heard this as a side effect of these medications.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, crazy, right? And so there's also lots of other medications that can cause sense of smell issues. I forget.
Psychological changes, even physical changes, which modifies how you feel about yourself, your safety. They're supposed to act upon you to not feel anxiety or pain or whatever else. And in fact, they just modify your entire understanding of the universe. And that's not a good thing with a dog.
Yeah, and I will say trazodone is probably one of my least favorite medications. just from personal experience, we had a dog in the rescue who's Presa Canario, Pit Bull, and Caucasian Shepherd mix. And she was,
yeah, let's pick the three worst that we could put together.
And I've known this dog since she was young, and we got her. We got her because she was being abused in the parking lot of the vet. So we know that for a fact. And it did not help the dog at all having these breeds. But she trusts me, and a lot of what we do actually is we watch our territory together because that's what she wants to do. But not great at the vet. She gets very nervous. She's actually never tried to bite anyone, but the vet was like, we need her on trazodone to come in. And I couldn't always go with, she wasn't at my house. She was in a foster home, and I couldn't always make it to these appointments. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just try it, because I didn't want anyone to struggle. But what happened is after 2 or 3 times of being on trazodone and going in the vet office, guess what they said? They said, she's worse. We need to give her more trazodone. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, no. And so the dog actually ended up having to have a procedure at a specialty clinic. And I said, let me go with you. We're not going to drug her. She did fine. She was nervous, but she did okay. They muzzle her when they examine her. I'm fine with that. I don't have an issue with it. And she's better without the trazodone. So, and that also happened with my dog Shar. For some reason, she got really nervous at a kennel. And I was like, well, maybe I'll try it. This was years ago. And she was worse every time after that if she was on the meds. So,
well, when you presage, you do a predictive behavior or feel on a dog, then they know what's coming up. So when you drug your dog to take it to the vet, they know the vet's coming up, and they don't like the smell, the being controlled. They don't like all the stuff that happens in the vet.
Yeah. So anyway, just a little side note on that particular medication.
Yeah. And it's usually always prescribed for, that is the prescription, period. There is no other means of intervention. Maybe the vet will recommend, see a trainer, but hey, every time you come, take it. Every time nail trim, take it. Every time you go in the car, take it. And then that just becomes the association to it. But then what else is that doing to the system if you have to drug it continuously throughout life? And many owners stay married to that until they find somebody to tell them different, or just go, is this actually working? Or ask the questions. They just, okay, it's prescription. I'm going to take it forever. And my personal experience with the doctor when I was in my young 20s was, oh, you have these symptoms. Okay, you're just going to stay on this. And it was an SSRI. And when I would ask, when do I come off? Well, why change something that's working? Was pretty much the feedback. I was like, but it's
convenience. It's human convenience. Yeah, it's human convenience. That's what it is. So right now I am working with 4 professional trainers around the country on exactly that, trying to change the client's understanding of things so that they either from what the vet has recommended. I love vets. Please don't, misunderstand me. But, especially there was one on a nutrition aspect. And of course, vets really aren't trained on nutrition, which amazes me because they understand the digestive system of the dog. But they're not trained on foods and how it absorbs and what it needs and all of that. The others are about exactly that, SSRIs or some gabapentin or some other thing that's mood altering, reality altering, and trying to get the clients to at least even talk to the vet to say, hey, can we reduce this, just to find out. And of course, vets don't want the liability because they've been told, well, this is what we do, this is what works, et cetera, et cetera. So they're kind of stuck too. So I'm not throwing anybody under the bus at all. But I have an old dog right now, senior dog, I'll put it that way, who started in with twitching a little bit. And so, my vet, who I've known for 30 years, recommended a certain medication and said, I'll give her 2 pills, twice a day. I went, how about if we start out with 1 pill? 1 pill was enough to put her to sleep, for half the day. And I went, okay, well, I'm going to cut it down to half of one of these doses, a quarter of the dose originally. In other words, work with your vet, and the quarter was just enough to keep from having these mini seizures. And that's all we do. I give her a quarter of that original dosage at each meal. She's perfectly fine and has been for months. So if it gets worse, then there's other things involved. We'll look at that, et cetera, et cetera. There was no known reason without MRIs, et cetera. I haven't seen any indication of it increasing either in amount or by time. So it isn't an increasing brain thing. So I'm not too worried about a tumor or any of that. So just let you know.
Okay.
How did we get off on medications?
Just enough, nothing more. And I believe that's referencing you, Nelson.
Just enough and no more. But you have to understand what is just enough. And that's where education of yourself on what a dog is, how it thinks, what works, what doesn't. Don't push the dog over the edge. Push it to the edge. Sometimes let it recover. That's the resilience that you're talking about. Because dogs, everybody has, the worst thing you can do to anybody, a human, an animal, is to have a perfect life that they never have to worry about anything. They have no resilience. If you make the wrong footstep and make a different sound, then it's terrifying because they've never had to face anything. So it's the way that you help them to face things and to the amount that they can handle. That's it.
I would say, going to the just enough and no more, you learn that through experience. Obviously, with the classes that we offer at the Institute, the RBBM1 concepts class tends to be a larger class, anywhere from 12 online to 25 people in a class. So those tend to be larger. However, when you get more in depth in the classes, we do no more than 5 students in those classes. They're smaller, they're more intimate. And, just circling back to the immersion program that, Julie is offering again this year, those are that classes we offer the immersion program. There's 5 students max, and you're living with these dogs, for multiple days. That is just such a great way, a fantastic way, a spectacular way to have that guidance from a Nelson Hodges or a Julie Hart. Kelly Engel, I know, helped you a little bit with that, or you guys connect somewhat with that immersion class, of getting that guidance through experiential learning. And that's where you start to learn to hone your skills. Getting the information is one thing, but then actually practicing it with 2 incredible experts in the field is a fantastic way to start honing your skills and having a better understanding of how you can become relevant to that dog, build trust with that dog. Right, Julie?
Yes, I think so. I mean, you never learn how to do anything without doing it.
Yep.
Exactly. You can read about it and prepare yourself, but at the end of the day, you have to actually do it. And, like Nelson was saying, these dogs really, really communicate in a very clear way. So you can tell if you're putting too much, too little, if like you did look at the dog and you think you didn't, the dog will tell you that you did look at it. Yeah.
Or it thinks you did because you kind of glanced that direction. It's going to tell you. Yeah.
How to actually not use our sight as much to feel things in a leash and feel things the dog is doing without having to look at it. Those are all important things. But I would say that if anyone wants a little taste of this, the monthly CHRI talks are a good way to do that. What's the topic this month?
Angela, do you remember what the topic is? That's tonight.
That's tonight?
Yeah.
The main aspects you should know when working with a dog.
Yeah. And
you want to elaborate a little bit on that, Nelson?
Well, I only have an hour and a half during the class because of someone's limitations on me. So I have a list longer than I could just list what all those things are, much less go into detail. But it's really working with a dog. What I'm trying to cover tonight is the overall precepts of how you should present yourself to work with a dog, not against, not demand, not force, not anything else, but actually work with the dog. Knowing, and one of the talks, maybe last year or year before, was the old saying, work with the dog in front of you. Well, what does that really mean? And so I went into some depth there, but it's even more, and that's why the class we used to call the 20-second walk. It's the concept of within the first 20 seconds, how do you reach that dog? And it's the class name has changed, but it's a 3-day course after. You have to learn some things first. You can't just come and take it because it's an extremely advanced class, and it's probably one of the most significant classes of with your own dog experiencing how to communicate and how to reach back and forth. In other words, really know what you're feeling in that microsecond with what that dog is. So, and that's decoding dogs. That's what it's called now, because it really is. It's decoding dogs and making you aware of every minute thing that goes on. So taking courses like that help you certainly with, before I had those 3 dogs that I talked about a few years back, longer than a few years, I thought I had patience because I'd worked with a lot of, feral, fearful dogs, aggressive dogs, etc. And, I thought I had patience at a lot of things. And those dogs taught me, 3 months of hand feeding a dog to, the point where it would trust you, and me not trying to push it to scare the dogs away. Because, everybody wants that end goal of I know what you can become, but it's not up to you. It's up to you to show them the pathway to get there, and they're the ones that have to follow the path. So, and it's the same thing with students, with humans. So, all you can do is show them the path, and every once in a while reach back and slap them upside the head and say, "No, you're going the wrong direction. Come back over this way."
With consent. Just kidding.
Yeah, I'll give them my consent. How about that? Bow here. No,
I don't do that in my courses.
So if for the last spot that you have, Julie, for the immersion program, how can people sign up? Where's the link on your website? Where can they be directed to?
On my Facebook page, Hart to Hart Canine, there's a event link. And then also on my website, Hart, H-A-R-T, the number 2, H-E-A-R-T, canine spelled out. You have to go under services to see the workshops, or just contact me. I'll be happy to send you the info. And I think, is it on your website too, Nelson?
Beats me. Angela, is it on our website?
The new one is.
The immersion
workshop, the workshop is, but not the immersion. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And if people want to find the live subscription that Nelson hosts once a month in deep dive topics, then you can go under the Canine Human Relationship Institute website, go to CHRI courses, and it's the first one, monthly CHRI class. And there's a link to click for more.
Yeah, website is actually chrinstitute.com.
Yes. And if you use Google Canine Human Relationship, he pops up first. That was the route I took.
Ah, I see. Okay.
And then I clicked it. Yeah.
And I'm there's a rumor that someone might show up at this year's Fearful Feral Dog Workshop.
Yeah. Cameo appearance of someone incredibly famous.
So now we all know it's Nelson.
Maybe if things
maybe.
work out, I'm trying to make it happen. But if things work out,
so do you take the last spot?
No, I'm not. No, I can only be there for the 2 days if I can be there.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I'd like to get back working with those guys at I'll tell you, the people at the shelter they're top pros. I mean, for a small town out in the middle of a very unpopulated area of the United States, there in northeast New Mexico, they are really good people. They have their heart in the right place and their minds too. So they've learned a lot. But I was even the first year, 2019, went there, and before they brought in a couple of dogs right before we started the first day, and I was going to go in to help them with, they had to give them shots and all that stuff, and I went in to see, and they were like zip zip zip. I went, okay, you guys know what you're doing, and they're young people. And I'm going, man, you guys have got a lot of experience. So I was very impressed with them, and they have taken all of the information, and they do a fantastic job. Really impressed with them.
They run a well-oiled machine there.
They do.
Yeah. They're fighting a uphill battle.
Yeah.
In many.
It's Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada, guys. It's not the big city.
The original Las Vegas.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, good discussion, guys. Thank you so much for
thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nelson, Angela, and Bree, for joining me today for this joint podcast. This will also be aired on the CHRI A Dog's Eye View podcast on Spotify. And if anyone is interested in workshops, you can go to the chrinstitute.com website. Nelson also has a monthly talk for a mere $15 a month. You get an hour and a half to 2 hours of Nelson into specific topics about dogs and dog behavior. I also have added a 2-day workshop for dog parents that have fearful and feral dogs that can bring their dogs to the workshop, and we will work as a group to help the dogs and the people form more trust and a better connection. Please see the links in the description for this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, Julie Hart, for this podcast. I hope you found it inspirational and educational and might cause you to look a little deeper into that canine companion sitting next to you today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like or subscribe or follow to be notified of our next episode. Your continued support is very much appreciated. I really treasure all the good feedback and personal messages I've gotten about my guests on this podcast. Hope you all have a great day.